Alex and Mary had been married for 5 years. At first glance, their life seemed perfect, successful, ambitious, with a cozy home and shared plans for the future. Alex, a young and successful financier, had bright goals and aspirations. Mary, his loving wife, created an atmosphere of comfort and inspired him to reach new heights. She was a painter, and each of her paintings reflected her emotions, her world, where they were both happy. They had been through a lot, from career struggles and tough decisions to everyday problems, but they always found the strength to support each other. Their life was like a romance, where love and harmony were the foundation. With each passing year, their bond only grew stronger, and the thought that anything could destroy their happiness seemed impossible. But in recent months, changes had started to occur that Alex could no longer ignore. It all began with little things: her distancing, the missing smiles, the long pauses when he came home. Mary, who used to greet him with open arms, now often avoided his affection, spending more and more time behind closed doors, absorbed in her painting or something else. But what troubled Alex most was her phone. It had become her invisible barrier. The screen was always facing down, and when he tried to take a peek, she would quickly grab it. This is her personal space, Alex reassured himself, trying to justify her behavior. But with each passing day, his doubts deepened. One day, returning home earlier than usual, Alex found that Mary wasn't there. It was strange because she always let him know if she was going to be late. He went to her office, a space that had always been her personal sanctuary, where she painted or simply rested. On the desk lay her phone, switched off but still warm, as if it had just been used. Without thinking, Alex picked it up and unlocked it. The first thing he saw were messages from James, her ex. The name flashed before his eyes like lightning. Alex had no idea that he was still a part of her life. James had long since disappeared from their social circle, and there had never been a reason to bring him up. But now he was back, and his words, "I miss you so much. When can we see each other again? Your letters warm me. I'm looking forward to our meeting." Each message struck at his heart. He quickly put the phone back, trying to calm the turmoil that filled his chest. This wasn't just infidelity, it was a betrayal that deeply wounded his soul. In complete silence, frozen as if in a movie frame, Alex stood, not knowing what to do. He knew one thing: he needed to talk to Mary. The sooner, the better. When Mary returned, the atmosphere in the house was tense. Alex sat in the living room, watching her as if trying to read her thoughts. In his gaze was anxiety and a coldness she immediately sensed. "You're late," he said quietly, but his voice sounded like a shadow from the past. "We agreed to spend the evening together." Her face paled, and she took a small step back. "Sorry, I didn't think you would react this way," Mary replied, trying to smile, but the smile was forced. "I met with Tina. She asked me to help with a project. You know how she's been struggling." Alex remained silent. His eyes were piercing, more so than ever before. He felt that her words were nothing more than an attempt to hide the truth. "You're hiding your phone," he said, not concealing his unease. "You're staying out later and later without explaining why. This isn't like you. You've always been open." Mary flinched. She felt her heart tighten from his words. She couldn't lie, but didn't know how to begin the conversation. Alex stepped forward and placed his hand on the table next to her phone. "Why aren't you telling me the truth, Mary?" His voice softened, but there was a resolve in it. "Why are you hiding your conversations?" Her gaze dropped to the phone on the table, and she once again tried to avoid his stare. Alex approached her and, without breaking eye contact, spoke. "You talk to him like someone who matters to you. Why keep quiet about it? Why hide from me what's important to you?" Mary closed her eyes and let out a shaky breath, realizing that her lies wouldn't work anymore. I don't know how to explain everything, her voice was barely audible. James, he was there when I was lonely. I'm not justifying myself, Alex. I got confused. I didn't expect things to turn out this way, but I needed to understand what I was feeling. Alex stood frozen. His world was crumbling before his eyes. How could such a betrayal happen? This wasn't just a misunderstanding, this was a drama he didn't want to acknowledge. Do you still think about him? His voice was almost a whisper, full of pain and disappointment. Mary, unable to hide her tears any longer, started sobbing. She took a step back, clutching her hands to her chest as if trying to shield herself from the inevitable. I was confused, Alex. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to lose you. But I guess I already lost everything. Alex stepped back, his gaze turning cold. You say you didn't want to lose me, but it seems like you've already made your choice, he said with detached indifference. Do you understand how I feel, Mary? It's like a knife in the back. Mary, feeling her heart breaking, whispered softly, I didn't think you would take it this way. I was trying to figure things out for myself. But now I understand that I was wrong. Wrong, Alex interrupted, unable to hide his pain. This isn't just a mistake, Mary, this is betrayal. You've betrayed me. Silence, like a heavy stone, fell over the room. Mary, struggling to hold back her tears, finally sat down on the couch, her hands in her lap, helplessly staring at the floor. Alex remained standing, unsure of how to move forward in a world that was no longer what it had been. Do you really think I can forgive this? Alex asked, unable to believe his own words. Mary raised her tear-filled eyes. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Alex. I just don't know what will happen next. Alex looked out the window, where it had already grown dark. In his eyes, there was no anger, no love, only emptiness, as if everything they had built had vanished in an instant. Several days had passed since Alex and Mary confronted the harsh truth. The silence in the house had become almost tangible, like a heavy cloud hanging over them. Alex moved around the apartment like a shadow, gliding from one room to another, not knowing what to do with himself. Thoughts overwhelmed him in waves, like an endless nightmare he couldn't shake off. He tried to initiate conversations with Mary, but every look, every word from her seemed cold and distant. There was no longer the lightness between them that once connected them. Her silence and avoidance spoke volumes, as if she was afraid to admit her guilt. Alex felt everything in their relationship crumbling, like a castle built on sand. One of those days, when the house was especially quiet, his phone suddenly vibrated, breaking the silence. The screen displayed a message from Catherine, marked, urgent. Alex froze. He knew that messages from her were never casual or lighthearted. After everything that had happened, every word could either be a lifeline or a blow that would completely shatter his world. He opened the chat, and his gaze landed on a short but alarming message, "You need to know something. It's urgent." His heart raced, and his mind flashed with hundreds of questions. Why was she writing now? What had happened? Did she know something he didn't understand? Alex got up and began pacing the room nervously. He needed to meet with Catherine, but his thoughts were tangled, and his emotions were overwhelming. He couldn't allow himself to be weak, but he wasn't sure he could handle another blow. The situation was becoming more unpredictable. After talking to Catherine, he felt even more lost. It seemed like the ground had slipped out from under him. When he returned home, his head was full of thoughts, but none of them provided any answers. He felt like his entire world was falling apart, like he was trapped with no way out. He tried to talk to Mary, but he didn't even know where to begin. This was more than just a misunderstanding. It was a betrayal, and now his life was pure chaos. He walked into the house, and not finding Mary in the kitchen, decided to wait. Everything in the house seemed strange, like time had stopped, and every object held heavy meaning. He made up his mind. If she wasn't ready to talk, he would have to bring up the subject first. Several hours stretched on like eternity. Every sound, a rustling of fabric, footsteps on the stairs, seemed like an intrusion into the silence. Time felt as if it had slowed down. When the door finally opened and Mary entered the room, her gaze was evasively calm, as if nothing had happened. She took off her coat, carefully hung it on the hook, and without looking at Alex, walked toward the kitchen. But her movements seemed detached. "Mary," Alex began, his voice quiet but firm, with an icy edge. "We need to talk. You owe me an explanation." Mary froze in place. Her face turned pale, but she didn't say a word. She felt that the moment had come, and hiding anything further was impossible. She knew the truth couldn't stay hidden, but she still tried to find a way to avoid this confrontation. "What happened, Alex?" she asked with effort, trying to appear calm, but there was no apology or sympathy in her voice. Everything was restrained, as if she was trying to protect herself. Alex couldn't stay silent any longer. He stepped closer, his voice becoming stronger, anger unmasked. "I met with Catherine. She told me everything. About James. That you kept meeting with him behind my back." Mary stepped back, her face paled even more. She couldn't look him in the eye. Fear and regret overwhelmed her, but admitting her guilt was hard. "Are you out of your mind?" she asked, her voice uncertain, tinged with irritation. "Did Catherine make all that up? I've already explained everything to you, Alex. Why can't you understand?" "I don't believe you, Mary," Alex shouted, unable to hold back any longer. "I know you've been in contact with him. Why did you hide this from me? Why didn't you tell me? We're married, and you're hiding everything from me." Mary took a step back, her eyes filling with tears. She couldn't express what she was feeling because words couldn't convey the horror and shame that gripped her. She wanted to make things right, but couldn't. She had no excuses. I didn't want you to suffer," she whispered faintly, almost as if justifying her actions. "You know how hard it was. He was a part of my life, Alex. You don't understand." Alex didn't know what to say. He felt his anger turning into despair. He couldn't believe she was saying this. "Don't understand." His voice was cold and distant. "You've lost yourself, and now you want me to understand. You've destroyed everything we built. Everything." Silence, heavy as a stone, filled the room again. Mary struggled to hold back her tears, but words wouldn't come. Alex felt his anger overwhelming him, and with each word, with every emotion, his world shattered even more. He couldn't get back what had been lost. "You don't understand, Alex," Mary cried, her voice breaking. "I lost myself. I tried to regain at least a part of what I lost when you became absorbed in work, when you stopped noticing me. James, he was the first. I couldn't forget him. I got lost." Alex exhaled heavily, feeling anger give way to pain and bitterness. He couldn't believe she was saying this. "You're telling me you got lost?" His words were like a knife in the back. "And what about me, Mary? You say you lost yourself. But what if I told you that you lost me too? You destroyed everything we built. And now you want me to just understand." Mary covered her face with her hands, and her tears flowed freely. Alex felt something inside him break, like a stone falling onto fragile earth. He didn't know what to do with all this anymore, and he didn't know what would happen next. "I don't know how to fix everything," she whispered, sobbing. "I can't go back to what it was. But I didn't betray you. You have to believe me." Alex looked at her. His gaze was filled with pain, disappointment, and cold detachment. "I'm not sure I can believe you, Mary. The first don't know what's going to happen with us," he said, his words like a verdict, but he couldn't hold them back. Silence once again filled the room. Alex didn't know what to say next. He felt like something inside him had broken irreparably, and this crack would exist between them, even if they tried to rebuild everything. The silence in the house did not fade. It pierced everything around, swallowing even the sounds. The walls seemed closer, and every step, every word felt heavy and unnatural. Alex and Mary were under the same roof, but the rift between them was so alienating that even a glance at each other felt unnecessary. Time seemed to have stopped, but the internal tension continued to grow. Mary avoided conversations, and Alex didn't know how to break the silence, how to start talking to her again as they once did. He was losing confidence that their relationship could be saved, but deep down, he still hoped for a miracle. The man tried to sort out his feelings, but the longer he thought, the more he felt that something had broken in his life. His memories of happiness with Mary became blurred and unclear. He searched for answers within himself, but they didn't come. All he felt was pain and emptiness, as if his life had become a theater where the scenery was falling apart, and he didn't know what role to play. One evening, when the tension in the house became unbearable, his phone suddenly vibrated. Alex didn't expect that a message from Laura, Mary's ex-husband's wife, would be so important. He rarely communicated with Laura, and nothing significant ever happened between them, but this message made his heart skip a few beats. "You need to talk, urgently. You need to know the truth." These words struck his chest like a cold nail. What could be so important that she decided to write to him now? Alex didn't know what was behind these words, but he felt that this could be a pivotal moment. He couldn't just ignore it without thinking. He called Laura. Her reply came quickly, and her voice was tense, as if she herself wasn't sure about what she was about to say. "Alex, I need you to come. I know you won't believe me, but you need to know everything. It concerns you, Mary. She betrayed you, and you need to understand it. You deserve to know the truth." Her words shook him, and Alex felt his world starting to crumble. Betrayal. The word hit his mind with painful force. Could it be true? Why did Laura decide to tell him now? What truth was hidden behind this revelation? "Where are you?" he asked with obvious concern. "I'll be waiting for you at the cafe on Park Street corner. Come alone. It's important." Alex didn't hesitate. He immediately went to the cafe, feeling that every step led him into the unknown. He knew that nothing would be the same after this meeting. When he entered the cafe, Laura was already sitting at the table. There was worry in her eyes, but also a certain determination. She pressed her lips together, as if she couldn't believe she had decided to tell him everything. Alex sat down across from her and immediately sensed that this wouldn't just be a conversation. This was something bigger, something that shocked him. "Hello," he said, trying to hide the confusion in his voice. "Why did you decide to talk now?" Laura sighed, slowly picking up a cup of coffee but not drinking it. Her hands trembled slightly. She knew she couldn't stay silent any longer, but the words were hard to come by. "Alex, I've been thinking for a long time whether I should tell you." Her voice was quiet, and her eyes showed concern. "But I can't be silent anymore. You need to understand what happened. You deserve to know the truth. You deserve not only understanding but also for your feelings not to be trampled on." Alex felt his heart beat faster. Every word of hers felt like a stamp of reality. What would she say? He felt fear tighten in his chest but knew that he had to listen to her until the end. "You don't know everything that was happening," Laura continued, her gaze becoming firmer, but still filled with pain. "Mary never cut contact with James, despite what she told you. They kept meeting, even after their breakup. I didn't want to interfere, but she confessed to me she tried to hide it from you. She thought you wouldn't notice, but it seems she was wrong." Alex felt the world crumble around him. He couldn't wrap his head around what she was saying. Mary, with James, he couldn't believe that all of this had been happening while he knew nothing. His entire reality, all the years with her, suddenly felt empty and deceptive. But why didn't you tell me earlier? His voice was cold, almost like stone. Why did you wait so long? Laura shook her head, her gaze clouded with regret. I didn't want to interfere, Alex. It wasn't my place. But you don't deserve to be lied to like this. You deserve to know the truth. You're my friend, and I couldn't stay silent anymore. All this time, Mary continued seeing James, and she hid it from you. Alex didn't know how to react. He sat there, his head filled with heavy thoughts that couldn't find their way out. Everything he had experienced with Mary, everything he thought he knew about her, was now shattered. His world felt empty, and his heart ached with pain. Is it all true? His voice was barely audible, as if he didn't want to believe what he had just learned. Laura nodded, her face reflecting all the sorrow she felt knowing that Alex had to hear this truth. Yes, Alex, it's true. She kept meeting him, even when you didn't know. And maybe even more than you think. Alex felt his body tense, the pain piercing him through. Everything he had thought was his world was now falling apart. He didn't know what to do with this truth. He sat silently, and every word he spoke was hard to utter. Why didn't she tell me? Why did she hide it? His eyes were filled with despair. Laura looked at him, and her gaze was full of regret. I don't know, Alex. But I know you deserve the truth. And you need to decide what to do with it. I can't tell you what to do next, but you need to understand this isn't a misunderstanding. This is betrayal. Alex sighed heavily. He knew that this meeting would be decisive. Now he needed time to figure out what he would do with this new truth. And maybe time to figure out what to do with his relationship with Mary. Mary sat in the darkness, her tears unable to wash away the bitterness that was consuming her from within. Her whole life now seemed like a lie, and it was hard for her to believe that she had lost everything she once held so dear. Alex, his trust, their relationship, it all now seemed non-existent. She sat in the empty room, surrounded only by the heavy silence, not knowing how to move forward. Suddenly, the silence was broken by a ring. She looked at her phone screen and saw James's name. Her heart skipped a beat. She didn't answer, but his name, like an old memory, pierced her thoughts again, like a needle stabbing into her heart. Why now, when she had already lost everything? A few minutes later, she decided to call him back. James answered on the second ring, his voice calm, almost emotionless. Have you talked to him already? He asked, his words cold and distant. He wasn't interested in her feelings, he didn't care about her pain. He just wanted to know what would happen between them now. Yes, I talked to him, Mary replied, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. He doesn't understand, James. He thinks I betrayed him. James was silent. The silence was full of meaning. It seemed like he had expected Mary to face this choice one day, but now that everything was clear, his words carried a hidden regret. You knew it wouldn't end like this, didn't you? His voice was firm, but there was a note of uncertainty in it, as if he wasn't sure about his own words. We both knew he would find out the truth sooner or later. Do you think I wanted this? Mary said, outraged, her voice trembling. I tried to fix everything. I couldn't tell him everything right away. I didn't know what to do. I love him, James. James sighed. He was certain about his own choice, but something in her voice made him hesitate. Maybe he was right to want her, but now, hearing her talk like this, he couldn't shake the thought that he had lost something important. You can't change what's already happened. You've already made your choice, Mary, and I've made mine, he said. If you want to be with him, you'll have to live with the consequences. You can't be with him and with me at the same time. Mary ended the call, and the pain roared back in her chest. Now she was faced with a difficult decision. Was it possible to restore what had been destroyed? And if so, how? She tried over and over again to find the words that could fix her mistake, but everything seemed hopeless. At that moment, as her world was falling apart, she realized that Alex was already far from her. He had made his decision. He was gone. Mary was once again alone, not only with her pain but also with the realization that it was too late to go back. Meanwhile, Alex walked down the street, every step feeling heavy and pointless. He tried to escape the nightmare, but the thoughts of Mary and what she had hidden from him kept haunting him. Her words still echoed in his mind, but his heart wouldn't let go. He felt like he had made the right choice, but deep inside, he couldn't shake the feeling that something important had been left unfinished. His thoughts were interrupted by a call. The screen displayed Laura's name. "Alex, where are you?" Her voice sounded anxious. "You can't just leave it all like this. You need to talk to Mary, she still loves you. You don't understand how much she's hurting." "I don't know what to do, Laura. All I wanted was trust. And I can't be with someone who deceives me. It hurts too much." Laura fell silent for a moment. Her words were cautious, but she felt that Alex still hadn't fully understood the situation. "Maybe you should at least try to understand her," she finally said. She didn't know what to do. She was always afraid you'd leave. Maybe her mistakes weren't so much betrayal as they were the fear of losing you. Alex felt his heart tighten again. Laura was right. He understood that her words were true, but it was too late. Mary had destroyed everything, and he couldn't just go back. "I can't talk about this right now, Laura. I need time to process everything." And without waiting for a response, he hung up. Meanwhile, Mary remained in the empty apartment, her feelings chaotic. He was gone, and she couldn't bring him back. Mary sat on the couch, feeling her hands begin to tremble. She tried to speak, but the words that once carried meaning now lost all their power. Alex stood by the window, his silhouette blending with the darkness, and all she could do was watch his back. "You can't just leave, Alex." Her voice was weak, but there was still an attempt to grasp his attention. "We both made mistakes, I understand that. I want you to know that I'm really sorry." Alex remained silent, his gaze fixed on the view outside, but now there was no warmth in his eyes. He seemed cold and distant, as if everything that had been between them was an illusion. "You keep saying, sorry, but in reality, nothing has changed, Mary," he finally spoke. "It's a shame you couldn't be honest with me, a shame you didn't open up when it really mattered." Her heart skipped a beat. She tried to stand, but her legs buckled. What was she supposed to do? How could she earn back his trust when she couldn't even trust herself? "You're right," her voice became quieter. "I was afraid I'd lose you. Afraid I wouldn't be able to explain why all of this happened. But there were no excuses, I know that." Alex turned to face her. His face was calm, but there was a determination in his eyes that left no room for doubt. "It's not about forgiveness, Mary, it's about trust. And I can't find it in you anymore. I tried, I really did, to understand you. But you didn't leave me any choice." He took a step toward the door, and her heart tightened. Mary, not knowing what to do, whispered almost silently, "Alex, wait, don't you want to at least try?" His response was quiet, but firm. "I can't. We've both hit a dead end. And I don't believe we can go back to where there was light." The door closed behind him, and the silence that remained in the room was so heavy that Mary felt as if it were swallowing her whole. Mary sat in the room, consumed by silent reflection, trying to piece together the fragments of her mind, which seemed so blurred that every movement she made felt like an attempt to reclaim something lost. She knew that the moment the door closed behind Alex, everything had changed. Her eyes saw nothing but emptiness. All her efforts, All her words, all these weeks and months of manipulation and justifications, now they had turned to dust. It seemed as if she hadn't even realized how deeply she had gotten tangled in this web of lies and secret meetings until she was faced with the one truth that couldn't be hidden. Alex had left, leaving her alone. It was something she could never have imagined. At first, she tried to justify her actions. After all, she and James had long since ended everything, but in reality, it hadn't been just an innocent case. She couldn't just walk away from someone who had once been so close. And as much as she was drawn to James, she understood that she had lost something far more important. She had lost Alex's trust, the one who truly loved her, the one who had trusted her, and whom she had betrayed. Hours passed, but she still couldn't calm down. Instead of seeking answers in her own feelings, she kept thinking about what had gone wrong. Why hadn't she stopped in time? Why had she allowed herself to get entangled in something that, at some point, became much more important than her relationship with Alex? The questions wouldn't let her rest. There was no answer. Her gaze fell back on the phone screen. It lay on the table next to her, and almost by instinct, she picked it up. She dialed James's number, but the phone remained silent. Her fingers froze on the screen as she realized that she wouldn't hear his voice again, that everything between them had now become unreal. After a few seconds of silence, she left a voicemail. "I don't know what to do, James. I lost him, and maybe I deserve this. I destroyed everything, but maybe it's better for both of us to leave it all in the past. I was wrong, Her voice cracked, and she couldn't continue. The tears she had been holding back since the beginning of this conversation began to fall down her cheeks. Her thoughts went back to the moment when she met James, when he was her friend, and then everything turned into something more. When she deceived herself into thinking she could control her feelings, that she could keep everything in balance. She thought she could hide her connection with him while still being with Alex. But now, with every passing moment, it became clearer, what she needed was acknowledgement. The acknowledgement that she could never truly be with Alex because she hadn't been honest with herself. Mary's gaze stopped on a photo of Alex, which was on the table next to her favorite cup. She remembered how they had taken that photo, how they laughed and talked about the future. How many times had she promised herself she wouldn't destroy anything, but every day that she continued hiding the truth, she was destroying everything they had built. She realized she could no longer return to that there was no way back, no possibility of getting him back. Her fingers slid across the phone screen again, but she couldn't find the words to write something that made sense. The words seemed empty, too simple to convey the weight of what she felt. Finally, she just sent a message to Alex. "I know it's all lost. I ruined us, it hurts, but I understand that you were right. You deserve better." After sending the message, she felt her heart tighten even more. It wasn't reconciliation, it wasn't forgiveness, it was more like coming to terms with the fact that she could no longer change anything. That everything that had been was no longer real. She had lost trust, she had lost love. Despite all the pain, Mary understood that perhaps it was too late to fix anything. Alex had left, and now she was forced to live with the consequences of her mistakes. The time that once seemed so endless now felt like a moment in which everything was destroyed.